Today I'm going to discuss 9 reasons why you shouldn't get involved in property investment. I'm going to be a thorn in your side, and my special guest Pete Wargent is going to give you some predictions for the future of property.
Are you interested in property investing, success or money? Well, you're in the right place. This is the Michael Yardney podcast, where each week you'll learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in 20 minutes or less. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the 4th time he's won a similar award in the last 6 years.
Thank you and welcome to another episode of the Michael Yardney podcast. I've been having a lot of fun putting these together, and clearly a lot of people are enjoying them because we're getting a massive number of downloads on iTunes and Stitcher, and lots of people subscribing to the Michael Yardney podcasts. So each week I'm going to be bringing you information about money, success and property investment. And today I'm going to teach you something slightly different. I'm going to be a thorn in your side in my mindset moment. You'll see what I mean in due course. I've got a special guest this week, Pete Wargent, who's a great property and financial analyst, and he's got some interesting predictions for the future. But I'm going to start off today by giving you 9 reasons why you shouldn't invest in real estate. What are you on about, Michael? Why not invest in real estate? Stay tuned and you'll find out. Usually I spend time telling you why you should get involved in property investment so that you can develop your financial freedom, so you can get more choices in life, so you can head where you want to go. But today I'd like to take a different tack. What I'd like to talk about today is 9 reasons why maybe you shouldn't buy an investment property. So if you're looking at getting involved in property investment, or maybe adding to your existing portfolio, maybe you should just have a listen to these thoughts before you go ahead. You see, over the years I've spoken with hundreds of investors, and I've often been surprised what's motivated them, the reason behind their investing. And many, they just get it wrong. You see, while property investment's an excellent vehicle for growing lasting wealth, occasionally it's the wrong fit for particular people. In fact, sometimes there are some legitimate reasons why they shouldn't get involved. So if you're looking at getting involved in property or buying another one, maybe you shouldn't if you're looking to do it to save tax. I mean, many naive investors think that negative gearing is an investment strategy. You know, their accountant tells them they need to save tax, so they chase tax deductions or depreciation benefits, and as a result I've seen them overpay on new or in particular, those off-the-plan properties, because in the process of doing that, they ignore the fundamentals of property investing. They think they need negative gearing, so they get all excited when they spend $1, and somehow or other in the process seem to save 49 cents on the dollar. Now that's crazy, especially as new investment properties always come at a premium, and they've got limited, if any, capital growth potential. Most new or off-the-plan properties are not going to grow much in value or at all. In fact, they're going to drop in value, but they're not going to go up in value over the next 5-10 years. And rental growth isn't going to go up either, because in general, they're in the inner CBD where there's a huge oversupply. Now, that's not the way to grow wealth through property. Now, just to make things clear, a property is negatively geared when the cost of owning it, the interest on the loan, the bank charges, the maintenance, the repairs and depreciation exceed the income it produces. Now, in my mind, negative gearing is not an investment strategy. It's a short-term funding strategy, and one that only makes sense if you use it to buy high-growth properties. Now, these tend to be established houses, townhouses or apartments in the desirable streets in the right sort of locations, which in general tend to be those high-growth inner and middle-ring suburbs, in particular at the moment of our 3 big capital cities. So that's the first reason you shouldn't get involved in buying an investment property if you're doing it for tax reasons. The next reason I'd suggest you avoid getting involved in property is if you're disappointed that you've missed out on the recent property boom. I see this all the time, that people feel that they've missed out. It's called FOMO, the fear of missing out. And that normally happens at this stage of the property cycle. When people read about those windfalls made by other property investors a few years ago. However, this is the time of the property cycle. You've got to be more cautious rather than being over-optimistic. Of course, it's understandable to have this emotion, but investing with emotion leads to bad judgment. It's exactly this type of emotion that makes people who have got this FOMO easy prey for the property marketers and the spruikers who are offering them get-rich-quick opportunities or the next hotspot. I guess that's the other reason you shouldn't get involved in property investment. The third reason is if you want to get rich quick. And many beginning investors, that's what they're looking for. However, property investment is a long-term endeavour. I found it takes the average investor 30 years to become financially free. Now, I remember when I told that to one of the journalists a few years ago, she was really disappointed. Didn't make a good story. 30 years to become financially independent. But to be honest, that's really what happens, because I found most investors waste the first 10 years. It takes 5 or 10 years to work out what not to do. They try a number of different strategies and they don't work. And then it takes them, 5 years or so to unravel those mistakes, to sell a lot of those underperforming properties. And then it takes usually 2 good property cycles to build a substantial asset base of investment-grade properties. Remember what Warren Buffett said, wealth is the transfer of money from the impatient to the patient. Okay, another reason you shouldn't get involved in property investment is if you don't understand how property investment works. I mean, a lot of people think they understand about property because they own a house or they've lived in a house. So they end up buying a property close to where they live, or where they want to retire, or where they want a holiday. Again, these are emotional reasons to purchase property rather than selecting based on sound investment fundamentals. On the other hand, of course, successful investors, they've got a formulated plan. They've got a strategy, one that suits their risk profile, one that helps them achieve their long-term goals, and one which has stood the test of time, one that's known, proven and trusted. Okay, another reason you should avoid getting involved in property is if you're not financially fluent. Look, if you haven't learned how to budget, if you can't yet spend less than you earn, or if you can't save, or if you're not good at handling debt, then property investment may not be for you because of the large amount of debt that's involved. Look, it may keep you up at night, or it'll probably get you into financial trouble because you don't know how to handle it. Of course, if you're scared of debt, and many people are, then you should avoid it as well. Many people don't understand the difference between bad debt and good debts, so they steer clear of property. But once you understand the importance of leverage, compounding and time, and how it works on well-located properties, that's the time to get involved. Okay, another reason I found people fail, another reason you shouldn't get involved in property is you're looking for a property to do multiple things. I find people, they're wanting to create wealth out of their property, but they're also looking for that house or that apartment to be their future home, or maybe it'll be a holiday home, or maybe it's where they're going to retire in the future. They're wanting that poor little property to achieve too much. I've never found that mixed use delivers premium investment returns. And of course, something's got to give. And in general, they're making those decisions based on emotion rather than on investment fundamentals. Of course, as I've said before, adhering to a proven strategy will mean you're more likely to buy an investment-grade property and not make this type of mistake. Okay, another reason you should not get involved in property investment is if your finances aren't in order. Because property investment's a game of finance with some real estate, some houses thrown in the middle. To get into property, you really should have a stable job or professional business, I don't know, whatever you're using to give you a steady income. And you also need to be attractive to the banks, so they're going to lend you money. Plus, you should have sufficient cash stashed away to give you a financial buffer to see you through the inevitable rainy days ahead. And, when interest rates go up, and they're going to at some stage. The 8th reason I'd suggest you avoid getting involved in property investment is if you can't afford an investment-grade property. Some people are so keen to do anything that they're going to buy anything. They're so keen to do something that they're going to just buy anything. And that's the wrong answer, because if you haven't saved enough to buy what I call an investment-grade property, if you haven't got enough deposit, or if you haven't got the ability to service the debt, rather than buying a secondary property, going in the wrong location, buying a property that's going to underperform, it's better to wait until you can buy the right property. I guess that's one of the reasons 50% of those who get involved in property sell up in the first 5 years. It's probably the reason that less than 70% of investors or I should say 70% of investors or more never get past their first investment property. It's just because the first property they buy underperforms and they lose confidence. In my mind, currently on the market, less than 5%, in fact, probably even less than that, of the properties currently on the market are what I'd call investment grade. The type of property that's going to outperform the averages, the type of property that's going to give you wealth-producing rates of return and stability in prices when the market eventually turns. So you've got to buy the sort of property that's going to see you through in the long term and not give you the heartache of the ups and downs. This means you need to buy the right property in the right location, remembering, of course, that the location is critical. It probably does 80% of the heavy lifting of your investment property's performance. If you can't afford that, sometimes the right thing to do is nothing. You make your money when you buy property, but not because you buy it cheaply. You make your money because you buy the right property. And the last reason I'm going to suggest you don't get involved in property investment is if you're trying to time the market or find the next hotspot. Sure, property moves in cycles, and it would be great to buy near the bottom or maybe to find that location that's going to be the next hotspot. But the landscape is littered with investors who've tried to time the market and fail. Instead of doing that, maybe just find the right property when your finances are right, when you've got the ability to do it, and hold on to it in the long term. Remember, there's not one property market around Australia. There's multiple markets. In every state, there's multiple markets too. So there's always going to be opportunities somewhere. In my mind, rather than wait and buy real estate when the timing's right, I'd buy real estate and wait. So I guess the bottom line of this message is, when it comes to buying property, of course there's plenty of reasons to take action. But there are also certain times, certain reasons when you should press the pause button. Of course, if you're not sure on your next move, why not have a chat with a property professional advisor, somebody who's independent and unbiased, to help you gain clarity and direction, help you move forward, help you buy an investment grade property.
If you're looking to get started in property or to grow your existing portfolio, turn to someone you can trust for independent advice. The team at Metropole Property Strategists have been involved in over $2 billion worth of property transactions, creating wealth for their clients, and they can do the same for you. They don't sell property, so their advice is independent and unbiased. Metropole can devise a strategy, their buyer's agents will buy your property for you, or you could use their renovations team, property development or portfolio management services. Arrange a time for an obligation-free chat at metropole.com.au. Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
Each week I give you a mindset message because, as I've said so often, you can't drive a Lamborghini with the engine of a Hyundai, so we've got to help build up your wealth operating system to make you think differently, to make you think like successful investors, entrepreneurs, business people. And today I'd like to share with you a message I got from a book called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, because he gives an example of a thorn. One of those prickly little things. Imagine, he says, if you had a thorn caught in your arm and this thorn is pierced right on a nerve, and with the slightest contact, pain shoots through your entire body. So in order to live without pain, you make every attempt to ensure nothing touches the thorn. You create a pad that protects your arm, he said. It's not comfortable to wear or sleep with, but you put up with it because it protects the pain. So you plan every area of your life so that nothing touches the thorn, and you put all your energy and focus on how you're going to be free of troubles with the thorn. But are you really? So I got this interesting message from the book that by doing something like that, what you've done is you've built your entire life around the problem. Of course, the alternative is simply just remove the thorn. But we all have our internal thorns. We've built our entire lives around them. We bury our childhood traumas, our fears, our emotional insecurities. And whenever something touches these internal thorns, rather than letting them rise to the surface, experiencing them, facing them head on, we bury them deeper by distracting ourselves from the pain by convincing ourselves it's not there. Today's mindset message is, you are not your fears, but you create your fears. Why is it that some people are scared of needles and blood, but doctors and nurses work with them every day? The same goes for snakes, for spiders, for door knocking, for if you're in business, for cold calling on clients. Here's another thorn many people have: the fear of rejection. But fear of rejection is not a notion that exists in itself. You can't fill a bucket with rejection. You create the fear by giving meaning to it. One of the authors I've learned a lot from over the years, Jack Canfield, said, everything you want is on the other side of fear. So now it's time for you to be brutally honest. Have a conversation with yourself. What are you afraid of? What's causing you to hold back? What people, what conversations, what things have you been avoiding? What would your life look like if you confronted your fears and grew past them? What would your relationships be like? What would your business be like? What thorn have you got in your life? That's my message for you, because now you have two choices. You can build your life around accommodating your fears, or you can face your fears so they're never going to bother you again. My suggestion to you is to pull out your thorn.
If you're enjoying our show, please subscribe on iTunes. You'll find us there as Michael Yardney Podcast, and we'd really appreciate it if you would leave us a review. When you do, we'll read it out on the show. By the way, Michael creates a lot of content he only sends out by email, which you can have with no obligation. So also visit michaelyardneypodcast.com and subscribe to his commentary there.
So my special guest today is Pete Wargent. Hi, Pete.
Hi, Michael.
Now, Pete, as an analyst of financial matters and also the property market, today I'd like to talk to you a bit about the big property trends to watch out for in the next decade. What do you see ahead for those of us interested in property investment?
I think the first thing that we might expect over the next decade is to see falling home ownership rates. So we've now moved into the third phase of the resources boom, which is all about the exports. So you remember back at the start of the mining boom, lots of focus on the resources regions, but now it's the big capital cities that are the engines of growth. And I think we'll see falling home ownership rates in the capital cities, such as we've seen overseas. Home ownership rates in Australia have been quite high. And it's not all about house prices. It's younger people, longer time in education, more about travel, and also a more transient workforce, more fluid. So more professionals will be contracting, there'll be more part-time work. And I think people will be changing locations, jobs and careers more frequently than ever before.
So, Pete, that's been shown in the latest census data, hasn't it?
It has. So we've seen a big surge in young migrants under the age of 30 to try and counter the ageing of the population. And it's leading to a big surge in housing demand, but it's not all from buyers. Some of that demand will be for rental properties, so there'll be more renters. And the government still isn't investing heavily in rental accommodation. So counterintuitively, despite all the construction, there might actually be a shortage of rental properties in key areas.
Well, what you're saying seems right, Pete, because we were all worried about the oversupply of properties, but it seems that the strong population growth, particularly in Melbourne and Sydney, has soaked up that oversupply. There clearly are some issues in the apartment market in Brisbane, but as you say, a lot of these migrants are in household formation age, so that bodes well for our property markets. Any particular areas you'd be suggesting investors look at?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at what it means for investors, people will be trading space for place and they want direct access to everything, plus walkability. So I would say a 5 or 6 minute walk to transport, amenities. I think transport hubs will become much more important as the traffic becomes more congested in the capitals. And I think a 10 or 15 minute commute from places of work. So it's really that missing middle section of the market. We're building lots of stuff on the city fringe and, as you said, a lot of high-rise apartments, but it's those middle ring areas with the livability that people will really seek. So I'd just be wary of the generic investor stock that's being built.
Sure, I think that fits in with the message I've been giving on these podcasts as well. Pete, one of the trends seems to be that we're having more migration. Migration is accounting for 55% of our population growth. Where are they coming from?
Yeah, as you said, there's a high level of immigration. It looks like population growth is heading back towards about 400,000 per annum, very strong. Increasingly now from India and China, so more than half of permanent settlers are hailing from Asia. And so people are wanting to live differently than in the past. I think something else the census showed is this increasing focus on the capital cities. People are not only migrating to the capitals, but they're also staying there. So expect to see more medium and high density living, and that'll put upwards pressure on land values in some of those middle ring suburbs.
Well, interestingly, when you dig down deeper into the migration figures, over 70% of them in Melbourne and Sydney, and when you take Brisbane into account, there's only about 12% of the immigrants going to the rest of Australia. So it's really a capital city and an East Coast phenomenon, isn't it, Pete?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think if you're looking at property types and locations that will outperform, already talked about that missing middle. It's an oversimplification, but ultimately property prices are a derivative of the land value that sits underneath. So I'll be looking for, if you're looking at medium density properties, definitely look towards the boutique end of the market, so boutique developments. And generally speaking, I'll be steering well clear of the high-rise type areas and high-rise stock. And I think if you look at Infrastructure Australia, what they've said is that there'll be a lot of focus on investment in the capital cities, which are the engines of growth. Also southeast Queensland and places like Newcastle and Geelong. But generally speaking, it's the capital cities that are generating the wealth.
So if we're looking at the three big property trends in the next decade, one is falling home ownership rate, you were saying. The second is more Asian migration. And I guess also more investment from overseas, Pete. And what's the third big trend you're seeing ahead for us?
Well, it's already happening. It's more high-rise construction. I think since the last census in 2011, there's much more high-rise stock being built, which typically refers to apartment blocks of 4 or more stories. And much of that has been built with the investor market in mind, but most of it isn't really investor grade, in inverted commas, because it lacks scarcity. I think investors need to look for that scarcity value. So some outdoor space, ideally a view, an opportunity to add value. I think, as we said, location will be critical. So definitely be a bit wary about some of those generic developments.
So how's this changed the environment for investors going forward, Pete?
I think that's it. I think the apartment market, I think if you think back a few years, we were talking about an undersupply of housing. I think the level of investment from China has changed that, and there's actually been too many apartments built in some areas. So investors will need to get a bit smarter about their asset selection, and if they're not familiar with the area, they should use a local buyer's agent who's familiar with that market.
So, Pete, in summary, what are the big growth drivers moving forward?
Well, we've touched on them already. So particularly, we're seeing a high rate of migration from overseas, a lot of investment from overseas, and particularly from China. If you're looking at the types of jobs that people will be doing, a big switch from the mining-based industries towards services. So we'll be looking at jobs like healthcare, education, science, and also there'll be much more construction to support the migration that's coming in.
Well, this will be really interesting to see how these trends pan out. And I guess that's part of the reason you and part me also spend a lot of time looking at demographics and the data. If you're interested in getting Pete's regular commentary, go to petewargent.blogspot.com. And, of course, you can get his regular commentary. We carry a bit of it on Property Update as well. Thank you very much for your time, Pete. Look forward to having a chat with you again soon.
Pleasure, Michael.
Well, that's it for another show. Thanks for spending the last 20 minutes with me, and I look forward to being a regular part of your ongoing wealth creation journey. Each week, as in about 20 minutes or so, I share some concepts about property, investment, success, money, and the mindset of getting wealthy. So if you don't already subscribe to my daily blog, go to michaelyardneypodcast.com michaelyardneypodcast.com, and you'll get the way to subscribe to this podcast by email, but also you'll be subscribed to my daily blog. Look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Michael Yardney Podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property advice. If you got value from listening to this podcast, please leave us a review and we'll read it out on a future show. Just go to michaelyardneypodcast.com/review and it will take you over to iTunes, where you can enter a review and let us know what you think. We'd really appreciate it. If you don't already subscribe on iTunes or on your Android phone, you'll find us there as Michael Yardney Podcast. If you'd like to gain instant access to the show notes or a transcript of the show, head across to michaelyardneypodcast.com. Watch out for our show next week. You'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 20 minutes.